welcome to Introduction to Linguistics. This video explains what you'll be learning about in this course. We'll start by defining what linguistics is. As you'll see, linguistics is the scientific study of human language. This means that we also need to talk about what language is. After we do that, you'll see a few examples of the kinds of things that linguists study, which will also make up the main topics that this course will cover. So, what do you think linguistics is? Most people are probably aware that linguistics has something to do with the study of languages. We can be a bit more specific. It involves a study of human languages, as opposed to, for example, computer programming languages. It's also more accurate to say that linguistics involves the study of human language, rather than human languages, because linguists are interested in language in general. Linguistics is not about learning particular languages, although if you are interested in learning a particular language, you'll probably find that your knowledge of linguistics is very useful. One last thing to add is that linguistics is the scientific study of human language. Linguists are interested in discovering objective facts about how languages work. In fact, this is probably the best way to describe what linguistics is all about. It's the scientific study of how human language works. When we try to understand how human language works, we're not only interested in words and sentences. Language is much more than that. It's a system that you carry around in your mind. And it's a system that comes to life in your interactions with others. Here are some examples of the kinds of questions that linguists are interested in. How did language develop in the first place? If you know a language, what exactly is the knowledge that you have in your mind? Why is it that small children are able to learn whole languages so quickly when adults find the same task almost impossibly difficult? Are some languages more complex than others? Why is it that some languages die? And if it's possible for a language to die, is it also possible for a new language to be born? Why do different people who speak the same language still speak it differently, for example, depending on their gender or their age? In first-year linguistics, you'll learn the answers to these questions, and many more, and you'll also learn how linguists go about finding these answers. You'll learn these things as part of a broad survey in which we explore together the richness and complexity of human language. The survey begins in this course, Linguistics 1000, and it continues in Linguistics 1010 next semester, which you have the option to take after you finish Linguistics 1000. At this point, we should take a moment to think about what language actually is. Obviously, language is a communication system. It's far from the only communication system that exists in the animal kingdom. Vervet monkeys, for example, have up to 30 different alarm calls that they can use to warn about different predators, such as leopards and pythons. Honeybees perform a special kind of movement, called a dance, that lets them inform other bees about the location of flower patches. Language is also not the only communication system that humans use. For example, we can also communicate using gestures, such as waving, beckoning, and pointing. But in comparison with all these other communication systems, language seems pretty clearly to be something special. It's far more complex and far more powerful in terms of what it can communicate. For example, take this opening sentence from a novel, which describes our own sun in an unconventional way. There are no monkey calls or bee dances or non-linguistic gestures that could ever express an idea as complex as this. Language is complex and powerful, but its basic function is actually very simple. The use of language typically works like this. One person gets some particular idea in their head. They use their mouth to produce a particular string of sounds. What you see here is a phonetic transcription of the sounds pink elephant. And then the other person, if they speak the same language, will end up with the first person's idea in their head as well. This is what we use language for. It's a system for transferring thoughts from one person's head to another. And this is an incredibly useful thing to be able to do. It allows us to pass on knowledge, to make plans, to express our desires and opinions, to tell stories and news. and to persuade others to think or act in a certain way. It's because of our ability to do these things that humans, as a species, have advanced to our current dominant role in the world. And we're able to do these things only because we have language. Communication is an important function of language, but it's not the only thing we use language for. We often say things that don't actually communicate very much, at least not in terms of exchanging information. For example, what information is being communicated if I say, "Nice day, eh?" Or, "How about those jets?" Or just, "Hi." When I say these things, I'm not really trying to pass on information. Instead, I'm just trying to portray myself in a certain way, as somebody who is pleasant and non-threatening, as somebody who is Canadian, if I say "eh," as somebody who has ties to Winnipeg, if I care about the Jets, or simply as someone who is willing to talk to you, if I say "hi." These are ways of using language to build and maintain social relationships, and this is another important function of language. It seems pretty clear that the communicative function of language is the main reason why language exists, but the social functions of language are just as important in understanding how language works. Now that we've defined linguistics and defined language, let's finish by taking a quick look at some of the specific areas that linguists study. What we saw a moment ago is that language is, fundamentally, a system for connecting sounds and meanings. For example, speakers of English know that the sound elephant refers to this particular kind of animal, and since we all know that, we can use this sound to convey the idea of an elephant. We should mention here that although most languages connect meanings with sounds, there are also languages that connect meanings with signs made by the hands. These are sign languages. And a sign language is just as much a full-fledged language as a spoken language is. To keep things simple, though, we'll only think about spoken languages in this particular video. So going back to what linguists study, think about how linguistic communication usually works. I speak a sentence, which physically is just a string of sounds coming out of my mouth, and you understand the meaning of the sentence. How exactly does this happen? The connection between sound and meaning can actually be divided into 5 separate levels, and each one of those levels is its own separate subfield within linguistics. The first level is the level of sound. We perform actual physical actions with our mouth and our ears in order to produce and perceive the sounds of speech. As an example of this, think about what your mouth is doing when you say pa and when you say ka. Try it, say pa, ka, and try to feel the physical difference. One thing you should notice is that when you say pa, your lips press together, and that doesn't happen when you say ka. This area of linguistics is called phonetics, the study of the physical sounds of speech. It's also the case that in any language, the sounds of speech are organized into a system. In English, for example, there's a word flirt, which consists of 5 sounds, but if we try to rearrange those same 5 sounds in a different order, R-T-I-F-L, we get something that can't possibly be pronounced as a word. Facts like this are part of the area of linguistics called phonology, which is the study of sound systems. This brings us to the next level of language. Our speech consists of sounds, but we don't just emit random sequences of sounds when we speak. We use particular groups of sounds that carry certain meanings. That's what a word is. A particular group of sounds, such as lock, which is associated with a particular meaning. There are also meaningful units that are smaller than words, such as the prefix un, which can turn a word like lock into a distinct word like unlock. Or we could make things a bit more complex and use a word like unlockable. How many separate meaningful units can you identify in the word unlockable? There are 3: un, lock, and able. Now think about the word unlockable. What does this word mean? Does it mean that something cannot be locked? Or does it mean that something can be unlocked? Or does it actually have both meanings? Questions like this belong to the area of linguistics called morphology, which is a study of the structure of words. The next level of language is the level of the sentence. It's possible to communicate using single words, but usually we speak to each other using sentences, which are groups of words that can have complex expressive structures. There are many different ways that words can be combined together to form a sentence. Sometimes the same set of words can be combined in more than one way. Here's an example of a newspaper headline that can be understood in two different ways. Enraged cow injures farmer with axe. Do you see the two different meanings here? The difference depends on who has the axe. Is it the farmer, or is it, more surprisingly, the enraged cow? What's going on here is that this sentence actually has two different structures that give it two different meanings, even though the order of the words is the same either way. Facts like this belong to the area of linguistics called syntax, which is a study of sentence structure. Finally, now we've reached the level of meaning. We put sounds together to make words, we put words together to make sentences, and a sentence is what conveys the meaning that we want to communicate. Meaning is a complicated topic. For one thing, we have to distinguish between literal meaning and contextual meaning. For example, take the sentence, "It's getting late." Literally, this sentence just conveys information about the time, but think about a context in which you might actually say this sentence. You might say it, for example, if your friend asks you to go out, but you're feeling tired. In that context, the sentence, "It's getting late," actually means, "No, I don't want to go out." That contextual meaning is just as much a part of the meaning of the sentence as its literal meaning. This is an example of the area of linguistics called semantics, which is the study of meaning. So those are the 5 basic levels of language, which are also the 5 basic subfields of linguistics. This is what we're going to focus on in Linguistics 1000. Each of the 5 areas has a chapter in the textbook, and we'll spend 1 to 2 weeks learning the basics in each area. Since the areas go from sound to meaning, you might think it would make sense to start at the top with phonetics, but phonetics is an extremely technical area, and it would be a little overwhelming to start there. So instead we're going to start, next week, by looking at morphology, the structure of words, which is an easier topic to get your head around, and so it's a better place to begin our journey through the levels of language. The 5 levels are only the beginning, though. You can think of the 5 levels as the core structure of language, but there's much more to language than just its structure. Linguists also look at how the structure of language interacts with various other factors, and this gives us other subfields of linguistics, such as historical linguistics, the study of how languages change, language acquisition, the study of how language is learned, sociolinguistics, the study of the relationships between language and society, psycholinguistics, the study of how the mind handles language, neurolinguistics, the study of how the brain handles language, and language classification, the study of how different languages pattern into groups or families. These sorts of topics are what you'll learn about if you choose to take Linguistics 1010 next semester. Linguistics 1010 is called Language in Context, and it will round out your knowledge of language by looking beyond the structural topics that we focus on in Linguistics 1000. This video has introduced you to the field of linguistics. We've defined what linguistics is, the scientific study of how human language works. We've seen that human language is a special kind of communication system that also has an important social function. And we've looked at some of the subfields of linguistics, including the 5 core levels of language structure, from sound to meaning, which is what you're going to be learning about this term.